called the United States aircraft carrier, just to set the record straight. Better people, better leaders, better nation. It's a terrific segue to allow me to introduce the next speaker. She's never shied from a fight. 26 years in the United States Air Force, the first female combat pilot, the first female squadron leader. Not a small set of events. She also flies what I believe, from my point of view, one of the most beautiful aircraft made, the A-10, the Warthog. Exactly. Second district for 4 years down in Arizona, now a senator, an amazing public servant, but recently announced that she was a survivor. I think this conversation will be relevant. I think the senator has much to share with us. So without further ado, Senator McSally. Go get him.
Thank you. Appreciate it. All right. Thank you for the warm introduction. It's great to be back at Annapolis. I was thinking back the last time I was here, I think we beat you guys in swimming. I was on the swim team at the Air Force Academy. But first of all, thank you for bringing this together. Thanks for the service secretaries and the chiefs, representatives from, I think, over 120 universities, university presidents, coming together for this historic and unprecedented opportunity for you guys to tackle and address the issues of sexual assault at our military academies and at our universities. This is so crucial. And, you know, I didn't plan on being here. I actually... If you had asked me, you know, a few months ago, would you be sitting here in Annapolis talking about military sexual assault, not just as a commander, but as a survivor, that wouldn't have been in the cards. But you know what? Sometimes life puts you in certain circumstances that you got to step up and lead. And I didn't expect to be doing this. I didn't really expect to share what I shared about a month ago. It wasn't a secret to the people who know me and love me that I was a survivor of military sexual assault. But I never really shared it publicly, and especially as a United States Senator. So previously, often when I get introduced, I'm defined as an Air Force Academy graduate, I'm defined as a Warthog pilot, and all the opportunities that I had to serve. And now, I'm also coming and speaking to you, not just as someone who's been through all that, somebody who's led men and women in combat, somebody who has very strong passions and feelings about how we need to root out sexual assault in our military, and at our universities, but also as somebody who's been through it as a survivor. I've been asked a lot since then, why did I share that? I want to let you know that we had a hearing on a Wednesday, and I decided on a Monday night. As I flew into DC from Arizona, I looked at the hearing schedule, I looked at, we were talking about sexual assault, I looked at we were going to have some survivors there. Within the military, we're having a rigorous policy debate about whether commanders should still retain responsibilities for the decision-making related to sexual assault. I strongly believe they need to. So I have those perspectives. I was going to share those perspectives, but I just really felt that with victims there on the panel and my perspective coming not just being as a commander but as a survivor, that I just needed to share that in order to sort of complete the perspectives that I have, from the fullness of everything that I've been through. And so I decided that on a Monday night for Wednesday that I would just share my heart. I'm asked a lot since then, why did you do that? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One is that I was hoping to also be an inspiration to some people who have been through this, maybe, provide them a little bit of hope. You probably know these numbers, but according to the CDC, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have been through some element of sexual assault or sexual violence in their lifetime. Think about that. I remember when I first arrived at the Air Force Academy and they would say things like, look to your left and look to your right, one of you is not going to be here at graduation. Well, here we are in a large group of people in an auditorium. If you guys look to your left and look to your right, 1 in 3 women here probably have actually been through this, and 1 in 4 men. That's a little uncomfortable to think about. Many of you probably have. Maybe you haven't even talked about it to anybody. Whoever has probably didn't report it, most likely. This is a dynamic going on in our society. It's very prevalent. There's so many people that have been victims of sexual abuse and sexual assault in their lives. Sometimes they're able to completely heal and be whole. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes it holds them back for the rest of their lives. Sometimes they cannot get out of the abyss from having suffered from those crimes. Sometimes people end up taking their own lives after suffering for years. It's all around us. And so I just thought, in many ways, as I talk to people about this issue, sometimes people, they have stereotypes as far as like who's a survivor, who's been through this, what do they even look like? And so I felt like it was important for them to see someone like me has been through this. Because really it's hidden in plain sight all around our military, all around our universities, all around our society, all around our neighborhood, within our families. And so I felt like, maybe as a public figure, in the opportunities that I've been given in my life, maybe I could provide some hope. Maybe I could shine a little flashlight to give some hope for people to get out of bed this morning who went through this maybe yesterday or maybe 50 years ago, and say, like, you can heal. You can prevail. You can not be held back. You've already been robbed of so much. Don't let your perpetrator rob you of any more. Don't let him rob you of today. Now, that's easier said than done. And everybody goes through trauma and deals with it in very different ways. Everybody's circumstances and everybody's journey is different, but I was really hoping to provide a little bit of hope for people. And also, to have the credibility as a leader on this issue. Again, I didn't plan to do this, but I certainly didn't plan to be raped either the day that I got up and that happened to me. And so the good Lord is, now giving me this opportunity to be a voice and to be a leader on this issue. I'm committed to leading on it. I'm committing to fixing it in the military. Our service chiefs and secretaries all know we're pedaling fast right now. We're working really hard to see what else we can do in order to make a difference, in order to stop sexual assault, and to improve the process once an assault is reported, or once it happens, and how it's reported. We got a lot of work to do, all of us together. And so, again, I wanted to just provide some hope, provide some inspiration, and provide some leadership on this. I think, everybody has a different path that they take after they've been through this. But if you think about when it comes specifically to universities, and specifically to our military academies, America's mothers and fathers spend 18 years or so raising their kids, right? They spend 18 years, giving them everything that they hope that they need. And some kids are coming to universities and the academies, maybe not with the best background and upbringing, right? Maybe coming from broken circumstances, maybe doing the best they can and being resilient and prevailing despite the situation that they're in at home. But in many cases, we've got America's mothers and fathers who are pouring everything in to making sure their kids have everything they need in order to succeed in life, right? In order to really be able to meet their full potential. And they try to equip them, for being able to continue to learn and grow and be the best that they can be as they turn into adults. And think about it, every single year, you've got America's sons and daughters, or mothers and fathers, dropping off America's sons and daughters at your institutions, at your universities, at your military academies. In some case, it may be, 15 miles away, right? They may be in your hometown. Maybe like, okay, you're going off to university and it's close. In some cases, they're maybe driving across the country and dropping their kid off somewhere. For me, I got on an airplane with some combat boots and bras. That's what they told us, to do back then. I was in the 9th class with women at the Air Force Academy, and they were like, these are the only things we can't fit you very well in. But anyway, but I think about it, like it was yesterday. I mean, just I was a pretty independent kid. I was a pretty tough kid, but I had also shared publicly, I lost my dad when I was 12 years old. I was the youngest of 5 kids. I was a naive young kid. I grew up in very stable circumstances, but then a single mom with 5 kids, and just looking to make a difference in my life after my dad passed and before he passed, telling me to make him proud. Really difficult times after that for me. As a naive teenager, I was then actually, before I went through what I went through in the military, I was preyed upon by a track coach. I had no idea what was going on as I experienced that. And part of the reason, not the only reason, but part of the reason I ended up going to the Air Force Academy, you're making these decisions when you're 17 years old. Like, people ask all the time, like, why'd you go here versus there? They're teenagers, right? So, for me, part of the reason was I wanted a good education. Part of the reason is I didn't want to saddle my mom with debt, and I thought paying back in service, would be a good way to do that. Part of the reason is I wanted to channel my feistiness and a little bit of rebellious spirit into something purposeful and meaningful. Part of it was I was actually trying to get away from this already being preyed upon in my life. Like, get me out of here. I got to get out of here. I just was resilient and survival instinct enough to be like, I got to get out of here. For me, little did I know as I went off to the military that I would have some similar experiences there. But what I'm saying is every year America's mothers and fathers drop their kids off. They're putting them on airplanes. There's a lot of stress, right? A lot of anxiety by the parents, a lot of anxiety by the teenagers. I know they're adults, but they're teenagers. Right? And so we drop them off at universities, and then we're like, okay, hope it all works out, right? I mean, it's a really stressful time. And America's mothers and fathers, they're entrusting their sons and daughters to you. And so the worst nightmare for those parents is to get that phone call from their child saying, I was raped last night. Can you even imagine? The fear and the anxiety of even letting your kid go and the fear of that potentially happening sometimes has people say, like, I'm not going to let you go. You can't put a bubble around people. You got to be able to let them go. But it's your responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen. It's your responsibility as you're coming here today and everything you do when you leave here to make sure that doesn't happen. Tomorrow's Friday night. It's your responsibility to make sure that doesn't happen at your university this weekend. And I know you're going to spend a lot of time talking about data and sharing data, and there's all sorts of things that are important you're going to be doing your breakout sessions. But I hope you can put a human face on what your mission is here today and going forward. And it's to do everything you can on every single day to make sure that there isn't another young man or young woman who has a sexual assault happen to them at your university, at your military academy, not on your watch. To make sure you have the climate and the culture that they're going to thrive and succeed. Look, I'm not a sociologist. I don't have a PhD in this stuff. I just have a PhD in my own life and just my own like reflecting on some things. So it's not based on studies or data. But like we send off their 18, 19, 20, 21, some stay a little longer, right? But this is the formative years of their life, and we just like throw them into this kind of very stressful transition, and then here you all go, and now you're all just here, and you're all living together, and then you throw alcohol into the mix, and culture, and all that goes on there. And if you got a predator in the midst there, they're gonna sniff out. This is a vulnerable time. People want to fit in. People want to do what's cool. That ends up having people maybe in more vulnerable circumstances than they're even aware of. And then it also allows predators to kind of sniff out their prey, right? It also allows bystanders to just sit there and do nothing because they want to be cool and they want to fit in. They want to be a part of the culture, right? So what kind of culture is there? What kind of environment do we have there? What is it that we can do in order to just like intervene? Whenever we have a mishap, a flying mishap, in the Air Force and across the services, we always talk about the safety chain of events, right? It's not just one thing that ended up with a mishap. It was like a chain of things that happened. And if you stopped any one of them, then the mishap doesn't happen. And you're not handing a flag to a family member because their airman didn't come home. So what is it in the safety chain of events? What is it in the sexual assault chain of events, starting with culture, starting with environment, starting with education, starting with, you guys are here to figure it out, right? That's going to stop this from happening. That's going to allow other students to have the courage to step in. The courage to step in and say, that's not happening, not to my friend, not to my teammate, not to my shipmate, my fellow, it's not happening. Because there are amazing men and women that show up at your universities and your military academies, right? They're filled with promise. They're filled with excellence. They're the best and brightest. But somehow you guys got to figure out how to stop the cycle. In the universities, again, all the studies are different, but, I've seen some numbers. It's, like I said, it's 1 in 3 women in their lifetime, 1 in 4 men overall. But in universities, it's college years, like 20 to 25% of women. And 15% of men. So this is real. So what can you do on your watch What can you do here? What can you do when you leave here in order to stop this from happening? I don't know all the answers. I know I'm here to help. I know I'm here to partner with you. I know I'm partnering with these guys more than they ever wanted or expected. But I think we've got to be inspired by those who have been through this. We've got to not be ignorant on how prevalent it is, okay? And we got to have kind of a call to duty and a call to action about what we're going to do to mix it up, to change it, to stop it. And when it happens, what are you going to do to provide a safe environment so people can get the care they need? What are you going to do to make sure that you don't have, junior varsity investigations and kangaroo courts, right? There's this whole element of once an event happens, what are you going to do with it after it happens that you all got to work on. And look, the military's had a wake-up call over the last several years and really has been digging into this a lot. But we still have more to do. The status quo is not acceptable, for sure. Many of you can learn from them. Absolutely. We pull people at the military, obviously, from society. So if there's dynamic going on in the society, we're bringing those people in every single year to be in the military. But we expect the military to be better, right? We expect the military to have the code of conduct and the standards that we have of honor and the core values across the services. We also have some unique environments in the military. Now, some of this is at universities, too. There's an opportunity for people to abuse their power over people at universities, for sure, right? Whether it's a coach or a professor or someone who's in a perceived position of power. For sure, these dynamics can happen at a university. It doesn't matter that the students are adults. If there's a power abuse that then turns into sexual assault, that's got to be addressed. But there's also, I've thought a lot about this, and this is more to my military teammates here, about the military academies. Again, I've been to the academy. I know things are not now the way they were back in 1984 to 1988, so I'm not going to be one of those people that's just stuck there and thinking about that. But, I think you guys, we all got to think outside the box here, right? We got to think outside the box about what can we do differently to not have an environment that's kind of a petri dish that can be ripe for these types of things to happen. And for the military academies, again, I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but I'm going to be a little edgy here for a second because it's just the way I am. Because I've thought a lot about this over the course of my time in the military and moving forward. These people show up as teenagers, right? We call the academies leadership laboratories, which, by the way, I never understood that because, why are we experimenting on people, right? We don't need laboratories to, experiment that. We've had the model since, when was Annapolis established? 1875 or something? Oh, sorry, 1845. And West Point was 1802, of course. So, yeah, we're the whippersnappers, right, at the Air Force Academy back in the 50s. But we've always had this model, of it's a leadership laboratory, right? And then what we do is, we put these teenagers in a pressure cooker and we crank up the pressure, right? We put them under, a lot of pressure. We kind of break them down to build them back up, right? Putting them through basic training. And then we make them do a bunch of funny things as freshmen and, their plebe year or dual year, whatever you want to call it. Right? We put them in a situation that's just like university, but is even more bizarre. No, I can't even think of the word. You crank up the pressure, right? You then create an environment where you do what you're told, right? Because we have this in the military, this covenant, this superior subordinate covenant that we're training people to send men and women into battle, to put their life on the line, to take others' lives. This is really serious. So you got to drop and do your push-ups and, shut up and march over here and, all this sort of discipline that we instill in them that's really important for the military, right? But then we put 19-year-olds in charge of 18-year-olds, and then we the adults leave for the weekend, and it's like the Lord of the Flies, right? This is just me talking, I don't know. Maybe it's gotten better, but I never understood that. No one in their right mind would put 19-year-olds in charge of 18-year-olds, right? Or even 21-year-olds. A lot of them come out of there, and they're they were the cadet, wing commander, I was a cadet wing commander. I was in charge of 4,000 cadets, and then I meet some of them and they're like, well, can you tell me how being a good squadron commander is? And I'm like, you don't need to be a squadron commander. You need to be a lieutenant. You need to learn how to be a lieutenant. You may have been a cadet wing commander, but now you're a freaking lieutenant, okay? So, like, and by the way, like 90% of you aren't even going to make it to squadron command. You're going to be out of the military by then, and you're not going to compete. So why don't we train them how to be really good lieutenants, not colonels? Like, I mean, can I just be real here? So, I mean, you know, maybe it's not the same, but I think it kind of is. Like, why are we putting 19-year-olds in charge of 18-year-olds? Why aren't we letting, you know, our officers and our senior NCOs be the ones in charge, you know? And they need to just learn how to be good lieutenants. I'm just throwing this out there. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm just saying, you know, I nominate people to the academies, right? Like, we go through a very rigorous process, and we're trying to send the very best and brightest, you know, off to be our future military leaders through the academies, which is an amazing privilege and honor. But again, get a sociologist in, have them study it. I don't know what happens. I just know, in my experience, you had, you know, 18-year-old graduate from high school. You know, the boys, they had no problem with an older sister telling them what to do, or a class president who was a female, or somebody who was a valedictorian, and they beat them. But in some weird way, after we kind of inculcate them through our training, like, somehow there ends up being like a resentment and a bad attitude, you know, towards the women. And I don't understand it. I don't know where it comes from. I don't think it's on purpose. But somehow there's like this weird dynamic that happens where you end up being like the other, right? You know, because we're a smaller group, and I don't understand what happens. But when you're putting people in that environment, from my view, I just, you know, forget about, for a second, sexual assault. Like, putting 19-year-olds in charge of 18-year-olds is not a good idea. Putting 21-year-olds in charge of 18-year-olds and telling them you better do what I told is not a good idea. It's just not. So there's my charge to you guys who are in charge of the academies. Like, we've been doing it, but this is the way we've been doing it since 18 what? This is the way we do it. How dare you? I'm going to get a bunch of hate mail now. Like, how dare you from all the academy grads. Like, how dare you change what we do? I'm not saying change what we do. I'm just saying take a look at it. Just take a look at it. Like, just because we always do it this way, you know, why do we got to keep doing it that way? Like, maybe we got to do something different. Maybe we got to, you know, and the environment that could allow abuse of power that doesn't just come in sexual assault. There's all sorts of other abuse of power that can happen that's not sexual assault, right? Sexual assault is just one element and one crime related to that. All right, I didn't mean to go off on this tangent. My team is going to make fun of me. But I'm just saying, my charge to you is this. There are survivors in plain sight. They're among you in this room, whether you've told anyone or not. Many people have come to me since I've shared my testimony that it happened to them, or it happened to their kid, or it happened to their loved one. There's something about breaking that seal. What I've also seen is, again, I've had people ask me, like, how could this have possibly happened to you? I've had some media people ask me this. Like, how, here you are, this strong fighter pilot, triathlete, how could this happen to you? And my aunt, like, then I'm just like, oh my God, you guys are so ignorant. I don't mean that in a mean way, but it just goes into the ignorance of, like, I didn't come out of the freaking womb as a fighter pilot, right? Like, that's not how I started. Like, these were part of my formative experiences that by the grace of God, I was able to survive and get through. And for me, I can just speak for myself, it was actually a part of what strengthened me and gave me more resolve to fight for others. It's by the grace of God, I didn't fall into the abyss. It didn't crush me, it almost did. But by the grace of God, it actually deepened my resolve to fight for others, to fight for women and girls, to fight for the vulnerable, to stop these things from happening. And I was able to be propelled on a path that actually turned it into a purpose, not into something that held me back, something that actually refined my purpose in life. As you know, the book of Joseph talks about, not the book of Joseph, but the story of Joseph. If you don't know anything about that, you can Google it tonight. But in the Old Testament, where he says, where others intended for evil, God used it for good. And I'm not preaching to you here. I'm just saying, by the grace of God, that's been my path. But that's not everybody's path. We've got a lot of people that are held back, and all their promise and all their potential and everything that they had when they were dropped off at your universities or your academies, it's snuffed out because of this issue. So as you're tackling the issue, open up your eyes. Have conversations with people around you, because many of you have probably been through this too. Let's be honest about it, and let's figure out, don't just do incremental stuff. Let's figure out how to maybe do something really different. Let's figure out how to do something that's, going to be really meaningful, to change the environment, to change the culture. And let's not just look at this bureaucratically in a policy wonky sort of way. Let's look at it in a way of like, tomorrow's Friday night. It's not going to happen tomorrow night. We're going to stop it from happening. Not one more face, not one more victim, not one more person is going to be impacted by this. So have that level of call to action, that level of commitment, resolve, and leadership. As you know, the challenge is that you're all here, but there's a lot of people who are not here. So that's the other piece. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your commitment to this. But of the universities that are present here, it's about 10% of who were invited. So what else can we all do together in order to have this be a larger conversation? So every university, every military academy, every military base, this is something that we as a society are committed to stopping from happening. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to answer any questions you have now, and I'm really honored to be with you today to share my heart. Yes, ma'am.
Senator McSally, thank you so much for your leadership on this. I really appreciate it. I watched your testimony the other day, and I know you said you wanted to inspire people, so you got one. So I just want to give you that. My question is really about the role of the commanding officer. So I didn't introduce myself, Shannon Nornberg. I'm the Sexual Assault Response Coordinator at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. So I'm here on the ground. I'm here receiving the reports. And one of the things I'm doing is working with the commanding officers. So I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit. Like you, I believe commanding officers have a crucial role in turning this around. I need them to buy into this. I need them to be a part of this if we're really going to turn this around. So I believe most CEOs really do want to get this right. Yep. And I know that there's legislation up there trying to pull the power of that away from them. So my question to you, is there anybody talking about maybe what we could do to prop them up and to help them get this right because they want to get this right?
Did they plant you as a question? No, first of all, thank you, and thanks for what you do every single day. And as you said, I strongly believe, and this is not an easy position for me to take, and it didn't happen lightly, but I strongly believe that the commanders need to hold full responsibility for this issue, and that includes the culture and the prevention and the response and the care and the support and the judicial decisions. Like, I strongly believe that. And people in civilian society sometimes don't understand that, and as we try to describe, this is not like anything else. The military is not like anything else. It's not like your supervisor at a private sector industry. It's the commander is responsible for the lives of the men and women under their command. They're responsible for training them to go to combat and maybe take lives. They're responsible for them maybe giving the ultimate sacrifice in those decisions. The commander is responsible for everything. The good order and discipline of that unit really starts that culture, and all that starts with the commander, right? To make sure that that team has one that has honor, respect, and core values, and people are not committing blue-on-blue crimes on each other like that. And so if you want to fix something, the commander has to be more responsible, not less responsible. There's plenty of commanders out there that would like to outsource this. We don't need them being commanders, by the way. we need commanders equipped. And a lot of them, again, well-intended, really good people are ignorant on the topic, except for some of the training that they get in the military. I've been meeting with commanders. I went to Luke Air Force Base. I'm going to all the bases in Arizona. We'll be going on some other trips to meet with commanders. We've got some ideas on what we can do to better equip and inform the commander. We're working on, I asked the DOD to basically set up a task force. All the service secretaries and chiefs have been extremely responsive on this, and I'm really grateful for all the support. For a very short timeline, we got to think outside the box and be innovative about what else we can do to equip the commanders, to help the commanders, and to do what we can to improve from the time an assault happens moving forward. What else can we do to improve post-assault victim care, investigation, judicial response? So we're working on that. We got about a month or so before we're going to actually produce something. Their task force working very closely with me so that by the time we mark up the defense bill, we're not just against something, we're actually for something. Because the status quo is not an option, but I strongly believe the legislation is to strip the commander of all felony responsibility. I'm really against that. But as I'm talking to my colleagues on the Hill on both sides of the aisle, they want to address this issue. And they know something else needs to be done, more needs to be done, a lot has been done. And so we're really working hard and we're pedaling fast, and I really appreciate all the hard work of everybody who's been a part of that. If you got some input, we'd love to hear it. So, we'll figure out how to get that directly from you, but we definitely want to make sure that we strengthen the process and strengthen the system so that commanders can stay involved and we can be effective. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Senator McSally. My name is Jill Thomas. I'm from Stanford University, former active duty JAG, current reserve JAG. I'm the Title IX coordinator and director of equity investigations, formerly stationed at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base.
All right, go DM.
Yes, indeed. On the prevention piece, even though the Title IX is on the sort of execution of policy piece, and in the JAG Corps it was a response type of position. I work with my colleagues at Stanford to try to work on the prevention piece because it's critical, and it really is. When I was a former federal drug prosecutor, you think about supply and demand. Yeah, I could put away a cartel member for 25 years, but who was working on the demand side. So I see this conceptually similarly. So my question is, with that backdrop, has it percolated to the top or at your level about a conversation about a paradigmatic and cultural shift regarding sexually healthy relationships like we can have among and between our young adults? That's what we do at Stanford. We have a program called Beyond Sex Ed, and anecdotally it looks like it's really working, and I'm just wondering, has this, thinking outside the box, has this sort of come to your attention?
That has not in particular, but I think these types of conversations you need to be, sharing with each other. Number one, right? What's working, what's not working. We're very much in the immediate task here, focusing on after an assault moving forward before we mark up the defense bill. But we still have work to do on the front end. So this task force that we have with the services, we're going to be continuing our work and moving on, looking at the front end. I think one of the biggest challenges that in the last month that I've been focusing more on this than in my lifetime, in a very profound way, the ability for us to research what actually is working and what is not working on the prevention end, I think is critical. We got a bunch of universities here, right? You guys are good at research. So how do we not just keep throwing things at the wall and trying them out on the prevention side, but how do we figure out in this environment, in this culture, with this generation, with 25% turnover every year, what actually is working on the prevention side and the culture side in order to address this as they're showing up at universities? And if that's one that actually is meaningfully working, why don't we try to research that and other things that may be working or not working so that you can all share with each other. And then you got to be nimble too, because it may adjust as the new generation comes in with different dynamics. That, hey, this seems to be really making an impact. So I'd love to get some more information on that. But I also think there's a research piece that needs to happen. Now, whether that's federally funded or not, we can have a conversation about. But there's a lot of research that happens at all your universities all the time. Maybe a focus on this would be really helpful.
Thank you.
We'll go over there and then back. Yeah.
Hello, Greg Gunderson with Park University. One of the reasons that I'm here as university president is because there's so much to learn from the military. I'll give you a quick example. Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri near our campus, its commander made a decision to focus on the suicide rate of service personnel, and for 18 months has had a 100% success rate in addressing that. And so I've come to admire the military for the discipline.
Yeah.
No organization is better able to, when it addresses a problem, solve it.
Yeah.
My question to you is, from your experience in the military, what you've seen in the Senate on your committee work, is there one thing that the military is doing that you wish everyone would emulate, something that you've seen or that you participated in that we could, as higher education learners, better adapt what we're approaching this, how we approach this problem?
Thanks. Well, on the spectrum of prevention all the way to justice, I would say the military is doing a lot of things, but the one thing that stands out right now is the Special Victims Council. And this has just been recent, where we now assign to the victim an attorney who is just for them. Usually, this is a profound crime that happens to a victim. They end up being a witness in a crime that's like the state versus the, the victim. perpetrator, or the military versus the perpetrator. And what we found is, through a lot of feedback, is they felt like nobody kind of had their back. That was uniquely their voice and their interests in this proceeding. And so the opportunity, which is like none other in civil society, for the victims to have their own counsel and to have them be assigned to them and be a part of that process we've heard, feedback, it's really made a profound difference in the process for a victim. For a victim who's come forward, says, I'm going to go through this, I'm reporting it, the whole investigation and the whole judicial process, for them to be able to hang tough through what is a very difficult, often very lengthy journey and very, very traumatic for them, to have that counsel who's in the room, who represents them, I think is something that we should be doing everywhere. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, ma'am. Thank you so much for your service. My name is Major Carmen Dykes, and I was previously assigned to DoD SAPRO. That was my previous duty station. I'm now assigned to MOMRP. We're a funding agency. We do federal research. We currently have a program announcement, pre-program announcement that we're about to release to do sexual assault prevention research in the military.
Great.
But when it comes to money, you can see how many people are in the room.
Yeah.
We can maybe fund 4 people to do this research, maybe, if we're really stretching dollars.
Yeah.
So I don't necessarily have a question for you. I just kind of wanted to bring that to your attention. If there's any place that is going to do this research, it's our institution, and there's just not a whole lot there. And so I'm really glad that you're taking the charge and bringing the fierce and force with you. But just. There's a lot of people who need money to do this. So.
Yeah, got it. Again, we can take a look at, we can take, everyone's always looking for the, federal government to fund, but, we can take a look at within DOD, that appropriate level, and we can have that conversation for sure going forward. But also, again, at universities or through grants that are more kind of social science stuff, I mean, there's got to be, we got to, again, think outside the box. Like, what other grants are available? What other research funding is available? You're going to focus on what matters to you. So, make sure that there's purpose on this. There's a lot of things being researched right now. There are a lot of resources out there for research. So let's research, if we care about this, let's make sure the research is happening in this area so that we can really figure out what's going on. One of the challenges we have, again, why I think the research really helps, is we just have turnover all the time. We have turnover, again, every 25% come in, new people to your universities and academies every year, but then even leaders, will start measuring something, and then a new leader comes in, and then they're like, I want to measure something different. And so we're often comparing apples to oranges. We can't get any traction because of the turnover that we have even in leadership, and everybody has new bright ideas. So grounding some of this in research, I think, is crucial, because then we can be comparing apples to apples. Thanks. Yes, sir.
I got to say one thing just to respond to that. We are putting quite a bit into research. And one of the reasons we wanted to get everyone here is to share the resources that we have been deploying in that research. So just to set the boat straight, and we truly mean that. I look at all the programs between the Air Force, Army, Marine, Coast Guard, Navy. It is stunning, the amount of dollars and human capital we put for that. And we want to make sure that is available to you. I remember in one of our testimonies we've said, if there's anything that you all want that we can share, it's yours to access.
Great. Didn't you mean set the airplane straight? Go Air Force. All right, anyway, go ahead. I had to get it in.
Hi, Suzanne Goldberg from Columbia University. And I actually couldn't have planned this, but when you said something about funding, I had to pop up and say something, because we dedicated actually over $2 million at Columbia to studying ourselves. We studied our undergraduates. It's a research study called Sexual Health Initiative to Foster Transformation, or SHIFT, at Columbia. And the reason I'm mentioning it is that the research focused on sexual assault and sexual health, along with mental health and substance abuse. And we all know that there's a tremendous link across all of these three. It turns out that there is not a great deal of federal funding that enables you to study all three at once. And so really just to flag for you that when someone's going to National Institutes of Health to seek funding on mental health. They can't necessarily get it for funding related to a project that also includes sexual assault and also includes substance use. And I'll just mention that one of the papers that came out of this research, which is again public health and lots of different areas, is called I Didn't Want to Be That Girl. And it's a study that is based on ethnographies of young people, of our students, who talked about what they experienced and why they didn't share it and how they didn't share it and how the social dynamics affected them. So whatever we all can do to find funding at the intersection of these issues, I think would be really terrific.
No, that's great feedback. We'll follow up on that. If there's barriers, if there's funding available for this, for generally types of research, but there's barriers towards it being intersectional, like you said, with the different topics, then we'll take a look at that as well. And I also, my guess is too, for universities, probably the ones that are not here, the first step is identifying that you got a problem, right? And being willing to admit you have a problem. People may be concerned about, we don't want to talk about what's happening here because our U.S. news, world report ratings will go down. There's got to be a way for there to be honest conversations to tackle this issue, that there is incentivizing the authenticity on it instead of disincentivizing the authenticity. I don't know what that answer is, but I'm grateful that those who are represented are here today, and we got to figure out, to remove those barriers for there to be kind of an honest research and sharing of data of what's actually going on and what's working and what's not working. Yes, ma'am.
Good morning, ma'am. My name is Samantha Ross. I'm the SHARP Program Manager from West Point. Thank you for adding your voice and leadership to the cacophony of survivors. It really matters. I really, really appreciate that. My question is to kind of go to something that you alluded to at the very beginning of your talk, and also to follow in line with what you said, to think outside the box. Yeah. So I've been doing work on college campuses around sexual violence prevention for about 20 years, and I'm always struggling with the belief or the expectation that colleges and universities are the nexus of where change should be happening. So I've done a lot of research about what's happening before they get to the academies or to our colleges and universities, and there is a dearth at the federal level and at the state level of comprehensive education about relationships and dignity and respect. By the time they get to colleges and universities, their attitudes, their beliefs, their habits are already formed, and we get 4 years, if we're lucky, to make an impact. So I wonder if there's any conversation in the circles that you run in on the Capitol Hill and in representatives in Congress about what the work could be done to make something that is addressing this. There's literally 8 states that I can count, based off of looking at the Guttmacher Institute, that do a comprehensive program that includes HIV, that includes consent, that includes relationship skills, and that includes the concepts that they so desperately need, because when they show up to us and alcohol is part of the problem, they don't have the skill set to leverage that in a way that helps them make good decisions that are healthy and supportive and respectful to their peers. I just wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, well, thank you for all you do, first of all, for all those years, and thanks for, that's a really interesting point. I hadn't thought about that before. At the federal level, a lot of what goes on before people get to universities is, education, K through 12 is managed at the state and local level, and I think it should be. I think we need less federal unfunded mandates, especially. My mom was a public school educator after my dad passed away, and long before I was in Congress, I would hear about unfunded, Washington, D.C. mandates. So these conversations, I think, need to happen at the school district level, at the state level, because that's primarily where all of that is being inculcated into our young people. But, as someone who's now leading on this issue, I can certainly be a platform and a voice to have that kind of conversation. It may not mean there's a federal, act of Congress that addresses it, but you're definitely onto something that definitely needs to be addressed. But that comes from, again, the bottom up, I think, in civic society, in our school districts, in our communities, in our states. What are they doing to address these issues? We cannot have them stick their head in the sand and then they show up to universities and you guys just got to figure out how to, how to respond to it. So thanks for planting that seed with me. All right, one last question.
Hi, good morning, and again, thank you for sharing your story. I'm Suzanne Dionish. I'm a professor of leadership and conflict analysis resolution at George Mason. And I'm relatively new to the study of sexual harassment. Some of my background has been in the area of mentoring, and we're going to present later on where that may have some impact. But my question, as I've been listening to a lot of presenters today, is we talk about people making the right choices or being educated. And yet what I keep hearing is, oh, well, that just comes with the territory. Like, I expect to be touched that way, or I expect that that's not a big deal. We were having breakfast this morning, and a woman asked us, why are we here? And we said, oh, we're going to this conference on sexual harassment. And I said, have you ever been? And she goes, oh, well, you know, it just comes with the territory. So I'm just wondering, yeah, exactly. So as the person who spoke before me talked about K through 12 or even earlier, how do we educate people that it's not okay? So it's not just making a good choice, but believing that what we're doing, I mean, how do we begin to have that conversation and culture change?
Yeah, it's not okay, right?
Yes.
But I can relate to that a little bit. Again, where in my experience at those times, there were many of us who went through what I went through, and many who experienced things on the spectrum of harm. And, you know, it was just this sort of silent epidemic. People just suffered in silence. But we're in a different place in time, and we're looking forward, not back. And so much work has been done, I think, over the last many years in the military and in civil society, where, you know, the awareness level of what has gone on for a very long time in many sectors of society, we're now finally having a conversation like it's not okay, you know, I think, and it's at a level that I've never seen in my lifetime, you know, across civil society. You know, how we inculcate our young people in that, I mean, a lot, you know, it's parenting, it's you know, faith leaders, it's coaches, it's civil society, it's all that, and it's those in the classroom, I mean, all that stuff. If, you know, Congress can barely pass a budget, so don't make us be in charge of that, right? But I think these are the conversations we need to have about what's going on in our society, what's going on in our culture, what's going on in our communities, and how can we better set people up for success and make sure that they know what the boundaries are, what's appropriate, and what to do when you experience something like this. I was talking to somebody last night. I mean, they're a fellow elected official who was just sharing a story about how his daughter went off to college and got a phone call on a Saturday morning. And no kidding, I mean, the fact that he said, like, I was afraid it was early Saturday morning, I was afraid she was calling to say, you know, something bad happened to her. And in fact, what she had shared was that somebody had put something in a drink, and like she was able to identify something wasn't quite right, and so they were able to kind of get her out of the situation and get her to medical care. But like, you know, what a wake-up call that was for that young woman, that something just happened in this environment that, you know, your parents can tell you all they want. You guys know, right, what the dynamic is, but sometimes you get blown off, you know, sometimes teenagers don't think their parents know what they're talking about, but until you actually experience that risk yourself or sadly, you know, assault yourself, maybe you don't understand what potentially is out there that could do harm to you. But it's not okay. So having that conversation about, like, that's not okay, and making sure that people know what they can do when they recognize something that's happened to them that's not okay. That's the key, right? That they know it's not okay, but then they do something about it, or they're willing, if they choose to get the care they need. That's the other thing we do in the military. We've gotten to where we allow them to do a restricted report or an unrestricted report. So that's another best practice, I think, where they can immediately do a restricted report that says, I was sexually assaulted, I need some help. I'm going to, you know, go get medical care, go get mental health support, whatever you need. But that doesn't mean I'm going to immediately be put into a room with the OSI to go through a full investigation about what just happened and go through the whole process, the investigation and criminal justice process. That a restricted report means, like, I just need some care. An unrestricted report means go get the, sorry, I was just about to swear.
It's okay.
Yeah, unrestricted report means I'm reporting it and I want it to be investigated and I want it to go through the, you know, the judicial process. So I think on the civilian side, if there can be, I don't know within the construct of the law, if there's ways to even model that, that's something to think about. But the first step is, like, it's not okay, but then what are you going to do about it? To get you care you need for the victim, and then to immediately be able to have a high quality, timely investigation that can lead to due process and appropriate, you know, justice. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody. I know we're probably over time, but thanks for what you do. All the best. Really appreciate it.